Good evening, everyone. My name is Asad Lalji on behalf of Avid Learning. Welcome to Art Beyond the Canvas. While paintings have long been revered as the pinnacle of artistic expression, we know that the world of creativity is vast and varied. Art encompasses a multitude of forms, each carrying its distinct own charm and narrative, breaking away from the constraints of two-dimensional canvases, providing artists with a unique opportunity to explore new possibilities and challenges in their artistic practice. It's not just about celebrating the artists and their creations. It's about recognizing the power of art to go beyond the traditional mediums and defy conventions. It's about embracing the endless possibility that art offers as it breaks free from the confines of a canvas and manifests itself in countless forms, whether it's through the installations that turn into a room, into an immersive experience, the photography that captures the transitory movement in time, the textiles that weave complicated tales, or the sculpture that gives life to matter. We could not have chosen a more opportune moment to discuss the multifacetedness of art than the recently inaugurated show, The Maharaja's Treasures, Selected Works from the Art of the Famed Air India Collection at this very venue. As you are well aware, Air India's collection is a testament to the diversity of Indian art and culture, with the airline playing a pivotal role as patrons in promoting and celebrating the works of many artists internationally. Tonight's program is the first planned of the 3 art conversations between Avid Learning and NGMA, with the Maharaja as the muse. At Avid Learning, we strongly believe in collaboration, and we are proud to present this evening with collaboration with the NGMA Mumbai, the Ministry of Culture, Government of India. Special thanks to the Director, Nazneen Banu, and Deputy Director, Shruti Das, for hosting us. This evening, we're honored to have creative minds from a range of artistic practices and disciplines participate, and it gives me great pleasure to welcome on stage our panel of experts. Co-founder and Chief Curator, Start India Foundation and XXL Collective, Julia Ambroghi. Artistic and Cultural Curator, Srila Chatterjee. Ceramic Sculptor and Co-founder, Director, Contemporary Clay Foundation, Anjani Khanna. Gallerist and owner, Pandols, Dadiba Pandol. And our moderator for the evening, researcher, arts educator, and curator, Charlene Wadhwa. Thank you very much for being here in such great numbers. Look forward to a fascinating session, and over to you, Charlene. Thank you.
Asad, thank you so much. Everybody, thank you very much as well. As I moderate this exciting session today, I want to take the audience to what you can expect with the panel today. We'll start with a small showcase of artworks from the Air India collection, and then we'll move on to introductions from the panelists about their individual practices and organizations. Then we delve into a panel discussion which unpacks aspects of institutional collecting, impact of technology towards democratizing access to art, and the relationship of public and private art ecosystems, and what can we look at towards our future. So basically, in short, how truly art extends beyond the canvas. Can I have the first slide? In this exhibition today, and if you haven't seen it, I obviously recommend that you do, you can view artworks from one of the institutional collections of India, which is intertwined with many, many moments in our history. In our many pre-conversations, I've also learned that employees of Air India were gifted paintings and an ashtray lovingly called the Dali ashtray. So can we have the next slide? And that this enviable collection was built by commissioning the prominent artists of our time, sometimes with air tickets as an added incentive. So as we go through this slideshow, you will see some very recognizable names, for example, the ones in front of you. They're from every decade of Indian contemporary art and modern art. The next slide. You will also see images of the most recognizable Maharaja sculpture, which was part of many posters, invites, so much nostalgia, and is deeply associated with Air India and its hospitality. As well as a sculpture known as the Dali ashtray. In 1967, in fact, Air India had commissioned Salvador Dali to make one, which is what you see on your right. Subsequently, many names and art mediums that you see here in the exhibition range from paintings, posters, memorabilia, and sculptures. Can we just keep going with some pause? Yeah. Thank you. Beautiful. Now that we've taken Air India as our starting point, I hand this over to Anjani to start us off with a showcase of her practice and a bit of an introduction about how it connects with what we're trying to talk about today. So I'll give this over to you.
Thank you, Charlene. Thank you, Avid, and thank you, Asad, for inviting me, and thank you, everyone, for coming. I'm a ceramic sculptor. I started off as, I haven't actually been to art school, so I started off as a potter, and that's where I got familiar with clay. I worked in Pondicherry with Ray Meeker at the Golden Bridge Pottery, but we learned how to make pots. And somewhere along the line, I realized that I wanted to do more with clay, and clay had the potential, the incredible potential to be anything. So a bunch of us, in fact, got together, and we sort of, this was in the early 2000s, we sort of felt that we wanted to push our practices, and we wanted to push the whole understanding of what ceramics could be. So we wrote a grant, we got a grant, and we actually, 4 of us got together and made a public art piece. In those days, there wasn't much public art happening. And we installed it, in fact, outside the NGMA here. Madhvi, who's here, was one of my colleagues in that project. And that really had an impact on my own personal practice. And I think it also pushed the understanding of ceramics. There was no doubt there were practitioners who were making more than pots, for sure. I mean, Darose was there, Remika was there. There were practitioners, Mrs. Primula Pandit, who I worked with as a child. So, but I think things for ourselves personally changed, I think, particularly for me. So I then started doing ceramic sculpture, and this is some of my work. So that was from 2000 to about 15 or so. We found that the whole ceramic environment had begun to change in India. And we realized that there were a number of artists who were doing interesting work, and we weren't really finding a platform. So we got together, again, much of the same group, and decided to start the first Indian Ceramic Triennale, which was held in, was held in Jaipur. Yeah, so these are some images of the Triennale, and this was held in Jaipur, and it really pushed sort of the understanding of clay-based practices. We didn't actually, our definitions were fairly wide, so it wasn't ceramic in its pure sense, but it was clay-based practices. So that was the first edition, and now we have the next edition happening in January next year, opening in Delhi, and we hope to see a lot of you there.
Absolutely, congratulations, we'll all be there. Now I request Julia for the next set of introductions.
Hi, everybody. Thanks again. I don't repeat the thanks. I'm Giulia Ambroggi, one of the co-founders and chief curator of Start India Foundation and XXL Projects and Gallery XXL. Over here, I just put pictures of what we do with Start India Foundation because I thought that is more apt to the talk of the day. So we started in 2014. The idea was to bring art in the streets, reasons being multiple. One is because we really believe that art has an enormous potential and power of impact social growth and creating platforms for dialogue, as we listen a lot in these days. engaging communities, one of these other taglines, but what to say, this is how to describe it in few words, and possibly activating like positive changes, but also democratizing what is an access that oftentimes is very limited, not because it's necessarily an economic condition, but really because of like a sort of like limit that people may feel in entering and stepping in an indoor space. There are many studies about it. It's not just like the ticket or the money that you have to spend. It's rather how do you feel in entering a space which normally is not really welcoming or you don't feel to belong to. Which is why essentially we bring art in very unexpected spaces, at times also very smelly for whomever has come to Sassoon Dock. It's viscerally smelly and we loved it actually. So our interventions range, they're quite different. Like we go from like these murals, which we call landmark, because they kind of become like very recognizable, and we put it, of course, in very, very visible places within different cities. In fact, like we work in many different cities in India. Definitely, like more in Delhi and Mumbai. With annually we alternate. So this one is in Lower Parel. It's about urban weeds, and is essentially how urban weeds are extremely resilient as people of Mumbai. I'm not gonna talk about the artworks, of course, but so we do like from landmark projects, which are like essentially, like more permanent in nature, like those murals, unless and until something major happens, stay for 10, 15 years. And they really create a sense of belonging, as we want to say, activating also some dialogues about very relevant issues, or at least like what we think are relevant issues. But also we try to inhabit spaces which are very rough, but they also characterize our society for different aspects. So this one was an exhibition between a container, the largest dry port in Asia, and the largest landfill in Delhi. So where your goods are coming from and then where your goods are arriving. And we created an exhibition with 150 containers. It was like a sort of fort. And everybody was sort of the same also through these like jackets, because we were like, the exhibition was called a work in progress. And we were giving like, those jackets just because we can all be the same in such spaces. Moving on, like we started doing art districts, where essentially what stays and is more the tangible trace are like murals. So Lodi Art District was our first art district, is in this beautiful non-gated colony of Delhi. For whomever knows Delhi a little bit, you know that Delhi is very much gated, so it's not accessible, it's not pedestrian friendly. And eventually you have beautiful parks and malls, which are not public, right? I mean, they're quite private in nature. So we opened up like this art district, let's say. There are 60 murals from local and international artists. But then what we are trying to do, and this was in collaboration with KNMA, and I put the image because it was really recent, it was last month. We are trying to activate it through community-based projects, like performances of different kinds, workshops, and etc. And then, yes, I mean, like you kind of, like, I guess that, I mean, few of you may know that we've done this project in Sassoon Dock. It was the second time. The first one was in 2017. And we activated, let's say, the dock through art. And the point is exactly like, I mean, to inhabit spaces which usually are not conventional for art to be. And to sort of like, understand, like, I mean, use art as a tool for understanding like different communities, our cities and our urban fabric better, essentially, especially in places which have, for one reason or the other, a lot of meaning for the DNA of a city, and opening up forgotten areas, marginalized areas, with art for everyone. That's about it.
Absolutely. I think a lot of us Delhi and Bombay bound people here would have experienced one aspect, if not all, of what you've spoken about. Srila, you next, please.
Hi, my name's Srila Chatterjee, and I did, for 25 years before I got into really showing my passion for art, I worked as a producer running a production house. We made hundreds of advertising films. And then in 2016, I was kind of born again, and we started Baro. Baro was a really beautiful store that was in Lower Parel, but it was much more than a store. It became a bit like a community center because we did all kinds of things there. We started working with not just music, film, and various kinds of performance arts. We also worked with bazaars that came in from Bengal, from all kinds of places, showing different things. And so that's how we first got introduced, or I first started working with craft that I had always been interested in, but now I got to be actually hands-on with. That led to the shop closing in 2020 with the pandemic. Baro Market I took online. I had a bunch of girls working with me who did everything. One of them, Ashni, who's sitting there, actually learned how to make a website and created it. And so we did everything ourselves and discovered very quickly that we had to find other ways to work other than the retail, that what prevented you in Bombay was the cost of retail. So we found other places to work, and that became really exciting because I think part of what happens is you grow with a place. So whether you're in a house with a garden in Bandra, or you're in the museum, or you're in another gallery, every time we went somewhere, it became a different story. And the other most exciting thing that I've done in the recent past is open 47A. Baro Market opened it in partnership with CNL, and it is the most beautiful little gallery in Kotachiwadi. We work with design, and it's a place we're always really happy to be. And it's got a great vibe, and I'm very excited about what we're doing there, because it's people from all over the place all the time there. I mean, you'd think, oh God, who's going to get there? You can't take a car in. Public transport is difficult, but it's wonderful to know that there's a whole world out there who thinks that you can still go places even if your car can't drive right up to it. So if you want to, in a nutshell, what do? I tell other people's stories better than they do, because they're the ones who can do everything really well. And since I can't, it's very easy to tell the story, and I enjoy it. So that's really what I'm doing.
Thank you, Srila. Thank you so much. Dadiba, over to you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Dadiba Pandol, and I ran the Pandol Art Gallery for probably around 2 decades, which slowly morphed itself into an auction house. And something that Julia said earlier about a gallery being an intimidating space, I certainly would agree with. And even as much as a simple thing as having a transparent door as opposed to an opaque door also is a hindrance. People tend to feel sort of inhibited by it. And I think most galleries and museums I can't fault as much, but galleries try to have this sort of pretentious sort of shield where they're not actually welcoming people, except people who are willing to drop money, which I completely vouch for. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. On that note, a bit of context of where I'm going to ask a couple of questions to all of you. I've been a student of history and a teacher of history now. One of the things that I teach is how patronage has evolved, especially in the 18th, 19th, and 20th century. So those are my areas of knowledge. In that, we always discover that there was a certain way in which our history had led to multiple kings and queens being one of the leaders of patronage for the arts. And at that time, arts didn't have distinctions like art versus craft versus distinction on materiality, because guilds were there as one of the facets of this patronage. Now, when we look at Air India, and in the context of this exhibition, patronage over time also looks like what Air India looks like right now, where there's this institution that has been able to enable a lot of art making and fostering it in the space of a collection that we have on display. So I wanted to ask all of you how you all think that forms of patronage in India have evolved in contemporary times, and according to you, who are, if any, the institutional collectors today? We can start from my left, if that's okay. Yeah? Okay.
Well, actually, since you're teaching it, you should answer the question. No, in fact, to be honest, I don't feel that I am equipped to answer this question. I believe that there are like, public institutions that should collect, but they don't much. And I think that in general, and that's not just in India, I would say, we are living in a neoliberal world, right? So the public sector is disappearing, I think, more and more, because like everything is getting privatized, and this is not just in India, it's everywhere. So I guess that like, I mean, if before they were queens and kings, I'm from Rome, you know, like, I mean, you know, like what else that like a city that has been built, like, to the church also, of course, also church. So those were the big powers, right? Now who are the big powers? Like, they are the companies. So I think that there is like a very, I think that in general, like the public sector is reducing more and more in general, and therefore also in this kind of course, patronage and support, right, and creation. So it's very much in the hands of companies, I would say now.
Absolutely. It's a good inflection point you pointed out, because India from the 40s emerged as a protectionist economy, but then it opened up, and then that's how this shift took place, and we changed forms of patronage. So, yeah, your thoughts on that?
No, I think patronage has undergone a huge change. Let's not go even centuries ago, but even since independence. And so there were government institutions that did support art and culture. And in fact, there was a rule at one time in New Delhi that any public building had to spend 2% of their budget on art. If you think of the early patrons of the arts, they were people with visions. They were not necessarily just companies. It's who headed that company that made the whole change. So whether it was TIFR, or it was Indian Hotels, or it was Air India, it was the person in charge who made that call about being a patron of the art, which sadly over the years has diminished. And it's diminished, and the common answer I get from companies is that we are answerable to shareholders. When they don't realize that, I've known several cases where, whether it be individuals or companies, they've gone bust, but their art is what has really bailed them out at the end of it. I remember Procter & Gamble I think it was in the late 90s, decided that they'd made a company decision to sell all their art. And it was a substantial sum of money then, but still, if you think of it, if they kept it till today, it would have had enormous wealth. So I think these are decisions that new management takes to try and kind of revamp and make things different, but they don't necessarily work. I think now you're going to come to a stage where it's going to be private individuals who are going to be patrons. And I would hope, it's not happening at a pace that one would like, where individuals set up institutions which support the arts.
Srila.
I have a little different view. I think the problem isn't about patronage, it's the kind of patronage. And if you don't have sustainable patronage, it's a waste of time. And sustainable patronage means that you're not just paying for something that you like and you buy now, but you pay for it to continue and to live and to exist. And I think what happens a lot with the arts, or what has been happening with patronage, has been it's equated to profit, to how much money you're going to make of it. And it gets, if you take just art, it gets limited to a handful of names and signatures. What sadly is really lacking is a much wider education on the arts that goes down right to everybody, where you don't then need to depend on patronage so much as you can to have people themselves think that it's important to keep things alive. So I would rather look for patronage for that grassroots level to come up, not for a couple of companies to get rich.
Anjani, what about you? Because you're involved in a public institution of your creating.
It's really a bunch of artists who've got together to do the Triennale, because we felt that, one, it needed to be done, and we're all volunteers. We are very poorly funded, and we really don't have all that much support at all. So it's again, you talk about individuals. The gentleman is, he's setting up an art center. He's given us the space, so that's how we have the space, and then we are sort of trying to, garner whatever resources we can. So, and we don't know where to turn, frankly, because we are artists. We are not actually in this business. But we just go ahead regardless, and, we think that the money will come and it'll happen, and, that's, we depend on volunteers, we depend on in-kind partnerships, that kind of thing. So, I mean, nobody's saying that, here, we're going to sort of, just support you in that. It's not that easy, let me put it that way. Yeah, it's not easy at all. Yeah.
Good points noted for the next national budget. But having said that, I find that it's an interesting range of answers, which ranges from the individual's vision versus how liberalization in India changed the face of the company and how much the company would invest. I'll hark back to the individual in a bit. But since we spoke a lot about private companies and their importance and their rise, I definitely want to talk about the 90s, which was the first burst of technology and internet infusion within the country. Whether the internet penetration all the way happens to the grassroots, which you rightly pointed out, Srila, whether 50% of the country is internet penetrated or not, in the post-pandemic world, especially in the last 3 years, the surge of the internet and technology changed the ways in which art was consumed. When you mentioned, for example, how you had to take a lot of Borough Market online, for example, we all had to adapt in some way or the other. Considering we're all members of the creative community, how would we do our work? When it comes to Daiba, obviously the auctioning tool in and of itself is an online platform as well. So I wanted to understand, looking at these two junctures, the 90s and the last 3 years, how has technology impacted art consumption and democratic access to it, if at all? Maybe we could start with you.
I think in the context of ceramics, particularly, I think it has had an impact. I think hasn't been much pedagogy in ceramics, really. And I think with the internet, now this is not about consumption, this is actually about production. I think access to information through the internet has made a huge difference. And in the last 3 years, I would think that, markets as well, through Instagram, and people are reaching out, and also globally, we have much more access. Other people have access to what's happening in India. We have access to what's happening in other parts of the world, as artists. And I guess also, with that access, there's enhanced appreciation, sales, opportunities for residencies, all of that has happened. I'm talking very much from an artist perspective. Yeah, so I mean, all that has also happened, I think, I would say, yeah, with technology. And especially in the last 3 years, there's been a lot of networking. Yeah.
I think that's the artist's point of view. And from the other side, what a change there has been. I mean, one of the good things on the internet is just your exposure to things you'd never have got before. I feel that there's a whole new world of people visiting galleries actually visiting galleries because they're hearing more about it. They're networked on Instagram, young people who before would have been really intimidated and felt like, I'm not buying, so I can't go. But now you just feel it's a little more democratic. You can go. There are walks taking people, things like that. It also allows people to get a lot more information. It's if you use it correctly, and of course everything can be abused, but if you use it correctly, there's a lot of self-education you can do at your time. You learn about things you like. One thing leads to the other. You're following. So there's a lot more people know. There's a lot of things you can find out about. And for me, in what I've done, I found that when I start with learning something which is maybe was the more conventional way, you go to it or you find out about it or you study it, and it rolls on. And then because of the amount that's online, people hear about what you're doing and they come to you, and it goes, and so there's this knock-on effect of I'm getting much more information and much more knowledge than I would ever have got 5 years ago or 10 years ago. So I'd like to concentrate on the good things that the internet has done. I'm not a believer in that it's the be-all and end-all of life, but it does get more people to the human thing. Even at Borough Market, we're online, but our online is like a calling card. What you have to come and touch and feel and see, that's what makes the difference.
till COVID, which was for about 7-8 years, we only did live auctions. We'd never explored the online space. We had a platform ready, but I, being computer illiterate, have always resisted technology like a fool. And I always promise myself I won't repeat that same mistake, but I've done it over and over again. And we saw, or at least I experienced something that was beyond my imagination. We decided from March we were sitting at home, and in May I started getting a little edgy, and we decided to work with the industry on putting together a small online auction because we couldn't get a photographer, there was no movement. So we relied on galleries all over India to send us images because at least they knew how to send us good professional images with the cataloging details. And we did a small online exhibition, and that surprised me hugely. And since then, I've seen several changes. One is that we've got confidence in this medium of an online process. And what surprises me most, because when technology and internet first came in, what I'd resisted was nobody's going to buy a work of art without seeing it. You know, something you've got to experience. It's too flat on a television screen. But what surprises me now is, since then, there are fewer and fewer visitors for a view. People are happy seeing their image on the computer and even buying it. That really surprises me. So I think technology has made a huge change post-COVID. Because had COVID not happened, I might have been resisting it even today.
That's very honest. Yeah, thank you for that.
Well, I mean, in my field, in the sense that, like, we do more than street art. Like, I mean, and I don't want to go into the differentiation between street art, urban art, public art. It's too technical and also, like, I guess, just confusing at times. But let's say that, like, if we talk about street art, so murals, let's put it that way. Since like the very, very beginning of like the web, let's say, like that artists that were using the streets as canvases were posting the photos, and actually since they weren't selling anything, their measurement of, let's say, like, capabilities was through likes. So essentially, like, there were artists that, like, also, like, at the very beginning with Facebook, they were ordering strange colors, and you were like, but why are you using this, like, purple? And they were like, because in this photo, through this, like, shadow, is going to look red. So, like, the piece, like, in the streets was meant to be photographed and shared through the web. Because by the end of it, especially at the beginning, where this form of art was not institutionalized at all, of course, like, there were limits, right? Meaning, like, they were, like, illegal pieces that were, like, immediate. And so, like, it was, like, essentially all about looking cool, because then the day after, perhaps, the piece may have been buffed and, like, painted over. So it was essential, the documentation, and it was essential, the sharing. So much so that eventually, I still think that majority of our pieces, even in cities as bustling as and as, like, crowded as, like, Mumbai, are mostly seen online. So the consumption of what we do online is, like, absolutely, like, greater than offline. So that's, like, a fact for what we do. In terms of pre-COVID, post-COVID, it was quite, like, crazy, because in 2017, when we done Sassoon, we opened for 2 months. The first 3 weeks were, like, you know, a sort of, like, I mean, the audience was growing, but, like, sort of slowly. And then we arrived to the peak that was 2,500 people over a weekend. Over one day in a weekend. Now, I mean, like, 1 week, we found ourselves completely unprepared, like, completely unprepared, because, like, we had 12,000 people coming over on a Saturday after. No, but it was crazy, like, you know, because we weren't prepared at all, like, after 10 days. And this was absolutely just because of social media from the grassroots, because we didn't do any advertisement. So much so that, like, our vision partner, Asian Paints, like, wanted to advertising, and we said, please don't, because we don't know how to manage this crowd. So it was absolutely just because of social media. And the target audience, because then we've done, like, an impact report, like, it was essentially from 18 years to 30 years old. It was our main, and even more 18 to 25, it was our main audience. Not only, I think, because of the type of things we do, but it's also, I believe, because in the 3 lakhs of people that we had over the course of 2 months, majority of this word of mouth was through the social media, right? Which of course are more relevant in that like age group, right? And are more used in that age group. So, I mean, that's like on a quantitative level that I really can say that it has been an enormous like difference and impact. From a qualitative level, I'm not sure. To be honest, at times I think that democratization is a big word because, as you were saying before, that education is key. I think that a lot of time the self-education may lack a lot because there is an overexposure to anything and everything. And it's very hard to discriminate if you don't have at least like a little base. I am positive as well that like, you know, there may be a moment where it's going to be a more, like, I don't know, like almost like a deeper democratization, but at times it's also like a little bit shocking because, you know, like people were coming to Sassoon and they were just waiting to pose on that thing because other posed on the same, you know, spot and you had to have the same image. So it was almost like a sort of like third body experience where like they were like physically there, but they were thinking just like to be online. Like, you know, and so it was like a little shocking at times. So that's the hard part, right? How to then, yeah,
Of course, I
realign
think
on
it's a
that.
very comprehensive way to look at how technology has impacted and not impacted multiple aspects of how arts has been consumed and created. I have two anecdotes to share in response to what you all have said. I create public programs for the National Museum and the NGMA in Delhi. What I saw, at least when it comes to at least the national museums in Delhi and in Bombay, is that what COVID urged them to do is to do a lot of 3D mapping of the museum, which had not been previously done. So make that accessible, which was the teaching tool that I use for my students in class. So that was like one thing that they did respond to among all the other things that we've pointed out that are lacking. So that really changed the game because I was able to access collections which otherwise would be very different to teach in online classrooms. The thing that the government does care about is cultural repatriation. While we may have a very nostalgic idea of wanting the Kohinoor back, the thing that the thing that has really happened over the last couple of years is that the push on decolonizing museums and having public partnerships to make that happen has increased. I was an accuracy researcher for something called the Unfiltered History Tour, which now plays at the British Museum. It's a guerrilla tour using all manner of technology from augmented reality filters all the way to 360-degree mapping to go on a tour in the British Museum about artifacts that have been looted from countries of origin. So as part of designing that, once the tour went online, it had 18 million social impressions, but most importantly, after that, the push to return increased in a way that it has never historically, and this was something that was statistically understood. After that, Scotland was the first of the UK countries to actually repatriate back things to India. And this is a start. Doesn't mean the Kohinoor is coming back. I'm just saying that the rest of the other things, I'm fighting for those. But more importantly, I think what all of you all echoed, which is a question that I'm rounding back to you all, is arts education. It has increased with technology, of course. But what has really, really changed in that is something to really think about because, of course, our arts institutions and their curriculums need to update themselves so much more. We have so many students and creators in the audience that have been part of schools and colleges, very well-known art schools and colleges within the country. I find that when we think about art beyond the canvas, when we think about art in public consumption, the crucial aspect of education, what does it really, really require? Because that is one of my major pain points as a teacher. So any thoughts on that?
Yeah, when I was talking about the internet and what it did with education, I agree that a lot of it is very destructive. Everybody's an expert because you have access to information. But so leave that aside. Actual education, real art education, I think it's less and less every year. I mean, I'm talking about children in school, in colleges, unless you go to an arts college, where is any education in the arts coming? And when we're looking at what is being done to curriculums all over the country and what's being taken out, I don't think the arts even matter.
I mean, in the ways that I agree with you, and in response to what you said, is that I mentor a lot of art students who are just graduating. I think the biggest pain point that we find in arts institution is they give you a theoretical arts degree, but don't teach you the life skill of making and earning and a living as an artist. And I think that we're all suffering that in some way or the other. And that's a crucial aspect in our education that has not made its way into curriculum. But in some Western schools, I see that it is part of curriculum, a little bit. So I think there's that big gap when it comes to that. But please.
No, do you really think that's essential, or that's the role of the gallery to be doing?
Both. Both. All institutions together should be enabling a living, sustainably financially living journey for creators.
I would feel that it kind of distracts the creative thing, because he starts then sort of, he or she, working towards a different motive. So I would rather keep that out of it. Yeah, make them sensible and enough intelligence to understand how to go through life. But I think, as I've always said, education is not at any school. Your education is basically at home, because the values that you're taught at home stay with you all your life.
Anjani, Julia, any thoughts on arts education?
I think what you're talking about in terms of the monetary, or not, or whatever, the systems aspect, while I do believe that if all you're thinking about is how much money you're going to make, you're not going to create. But there are other parts of it which I deal with every day when we're working with craftspeople, artists, designers. I really see no reason why they don't know how to fill in an Excel sheet that just gives you a name, a number, and a title. It's a nightmare. And I don't think it's right to say, I'm an artist, I can't do this. You can't get away with that with anything else. And we've had these discussions at length with all the graduates from the NID and the teachers, and my uncle, who is the director, saying, what did you teach them? They can make all this, but they can't tell us what they've done. And so I think it's important to have that. Yeah.
What do you think?
Well, I haven't been through art school myself. Yeah, so it's a little difficult, but one is self-taught, and I do think, at least as far as ceramics is concerned, I think the internet, for instance, has had an impact. It's not necessarily been a negative impact. I think people have, even basic techniques have become, more accessible. And I guess, but I wouldn't like to talk about arts colleges and what goes on there, because I really haven't had personal experience. Yeah, I mean, I'm not self-taught, but I'm taught in a very different kind of environment. Yeah, in an informal environment.
Julia, any thoughts?
Well, I mean, just like that, we are talking about two different arts education, I guess. Like, one is like, at the elementary schools or like, high schools. And I think that, I also know that in Italy, for instance, like it's been like completely cut off the curriculum, almost like it's 1 hour per week, and it's just like very much symptomatic of like also a very conscious decision from government perspective of not wanting you to like learn art, because it's not just art, right? It's like also politics somehow. I mean, there is a lot of it like behind, and I think there is also that imagination that one can access like through art, and so I think there is a very conscious decision to eliminate and eradicate art from curriculum, and that's like really the dangerous part, I guess. When it comes to, when you are in an art college, it means that you made your choice, right? So, it's already something that it's much more there. And then we can open a conversation on like how, like it would be more or less like, but I think that in the art colleges, what is missing the most, I guess, is like more interaction, rather than how can I say, teaching on how to fill an Excel or something like that, is the interaction with like what's next. So a lot of time I think that it's too compartmentalized. You finish the art college, but then you're barely exposed to galleries and all. So it would be great to have more orientation courses, also like in places which are not the main cities, but the tier 2 cities as well, right? Because everything like is really like much more in the tier 1 city, and that's like I think like a big miss in the country. Like more. More exchange through orientation courses, meeting, like mentorships, and all of those things. That I think, yes, would be great.
I think in that, what Dadima mentioned is the role of the gallery, also as an institution that teaches, becomes crucial. I had a couple of individual questions for you all. Anjani, this was one for you to like unpack. You mentioned your role in the ceramics triennale, and big congratulations on what's going to happen in Delhi soon. You know, in our conversations, you mentioned how working with ceramics has its own set of challenges, you know. In the understanding that we have of material hierarchies when it comes to the mediums of art, how does it impact a creator's journey? Like, how would you think of this?
Well, I think things are changing. So that is where I think, you know, there is a much more sort of openness to different media. And I think that's why we have a space now. And things have changed over the last 20, 25 years, I think. And so, I mean, like I mentioned earlier in my opening remarks, I mean, we really, when we did this project and we actively placed ourselves outside of the National Gallery of Modern Art because we felt that we were outsiders in a sense. I don't think we feel that now, you know. So I think things are changing, but I think there's still a way to go. I mean, you know, so that's still something that, you know, I think mainstream galleries, for instance, there are not that many mainstream galleries that will show ceramics, you know, so that's, that definitely needs to change over time, I think. I mean, not necessarily as ceramics, but I mean, even ceramic artists don't get, you know, that much access to mainstream galleries, and there are a few galleries who will promote ceramics. And that's certainly, I think, something to do with the hierarchies that have existed and I think are slowly breaking down. And I think I'm hopeful.
Yeah. Dadiba, in this trend of, you know, material hierarchies, have you noticed that?
No, I would certainly agree with you. I mean, I'd entirely agree with you because to some degree you've got a well-established artist who works in a medium which is not their conventional medium and actually produces a clumsy work of art. But that'll get more attention than a good work made in clay by a ceramist. So it is true.
Something for all of us to change in this generation and onwards. Okay. Srila, you know that I think a lot about systems. So I wanted to understand that when it comes to systemic levels of how to support and empower craftspeople in India, what are the ways in which we can ensure continued growth and preservation of traditional crafts? Because that's one area that you're very, very passionate about. You've worked for it. In my current research at the Chemol archives, what I've also learned is that patrons of art also had a lot of love and passion for indigenous crafts and art as well. So that was something that Keku Gandhi and Kaushik Gandhi were very, very keen that a lot of kalamkari art, Warli art make its way into gallery spaces, make its way into mainstream, quote unquote, mainstream spaces. So what can we do and what are we not doing?
Okay, I'm a little allergic to the whole concept of systemic stuff because it doesn't happen. So what happens is when when you create spheres of influence that really make a difference. And there are certain, I think for me the most fundamental thing is to change this whole categorization of what art is. That craft is this and design is that and art is the other. It's how, and ceramics is another. To me, if you really want change, you're getting craft out of being this, oh, we look after you, you do lovely things, but it's for when I want to buy a little pot and put it on the table, but it's not serious. I mean, it's time that you looked at an artist as an artist. Are they good? Are they producing great stuff? And I'll give you an example of what can happen. This is not a plug for the show we've got right now, but it is from there. For me, it's a game changer. It's the litmus test. And we're only 5 days old, and I think it's passed the test, which is one person who decided that we've got to change the way craft is viewed, is dealt with. And for 3 years, he systematically, using a system because he's a systems engineer, not an artist, not a gallerist, worked with 12 craftspeople of immense skill across one area in Kutch, but all over the place. Didn't build a centralized workshop, but let them use their workshops and said to each one or tried to make for each one get away from the drudgery of a workshop that was meant only to produce for a market. So whether they were doing really well, but making 1 million of one kind of thing, or they were doing pathetic stuff that sold, that's all they were doing. So when the workshop changed into something that was creative, joyful, that was full of input. So it was like going to design school for 3 years. You're getting inputs and being exposed to stuff. You found 12 skilled craftspeople who became unbelievable artists. I mean, unbelievable artists. I'm saying this, you have to come and see it. But, and they were not collaborating with anyone. There was nobody telling them what to do. This is what happens when you're allowed to do something and to think. And why did that happen? Because you didn't say you're a craftsman. You said, you're an artist, think like one. Get away from just making the same thing every day. So that's what I feel about craft. You need to stop thinking of it as something that's, oh, it's lovely, it's been around a long time, and we'll buy something every now and then, and it's a patronage. It can't be a patronage. It has to be something that's changing, because if you want it to really flourish and you want those skills, which I think are unbelievable, to stay, they need to be adapted, they need to change to what is required. And the smart or the really skilled people who are interested see that and they make the change. And it's wrong to say, oh, that's not old. So what if it's not old? It was made yesterday and it's brilliant because the craftsperson has adapted. So that's one thing. We keep saying old is good. That's not true. Old is also good, but not necessarily better. And the other thing I feel very strongly about, which could be systemized, is if we created something like a craft mark, where every craftsman or every piece of craft could only be that if it had the mark, which means then that you don't say batik is coming off a million reams of batik are coming off some kind of machine, some kind of mill, but it's actual batik being done. So if you were certifying things and it was real, you then keep craft going and make it possible for incredibly skilled people to be different. So there are lots of things that can be done, but these are simple things.
Yeah, and that's very interesting because, yes, please.
I think the basic thing with craft is, yes, craft is functional or has been traditionally functional. But I think more than referring it to a craft, I think giving that craftsman an identity by his name rather than, saying this is what genre. I think that will really make the change. I mean, the Crafts Museum in Delhi is a great place to go to. So I don't think craft in any way is less if it elevates itself. And for that, even the person practicing needs to make that change.
The Tribal Art Museum in Bhopal has been one of the
fantastic
unique successes. And I'm very proud because I'm from Bhopal. So
oh, okay. Yeah, congratulations.
It's my win.
Yes, I totally agree. I left that out. It was one of my points that the giving somebody, the same way an artist owns something, every artist to me, so I don't think of it as being different. So the craftsperson, a really good craftsperson is an artist. And they're putting their name there. They're signing it. They're telling you what they're doing. And they're not feeling any lesser because you're giving them the same respect.
Of course.
So it's really about a shift in the identity or the headspace of everyone, where you just recognize great prowess in whatever it is, whether it's a painting or a piece of sculpture or a piece of ceramic or something that you've traditionally called craft.
Yeah, of course. And, if we can have a brand identity of an artist as a person which has lent itself to that identity, the same should be for crafts. Would you like to add something?
Like Sheila, I'd like to make a plug. Basically, next iteration, the first one was called Breaking Ground. The next one is Common Ground, and it's precisely these kind of areas that we are trying to also. We've got traditional people who've come from traditional craft, also as a part of the Triennale, and pretty much absolutely on par with all the other artists. So that's something that we're very conscious of, and that's why Common Ground now. And let's see how it goes. But
appropriate name for an appropriate time. I'll now bring the conversation back to Julia a bit. We speak about the requirements that we have when it comes to the support of public arts. basically, when it comes to whether it is a private-public partnership, whether it is funding from the government. Now, in your space, specifically with what you're doing, there's so much private-public partnerships that you've been part of, which have evolved over the years of START's presence in India. What is the best way that we can look at elevating private-public partnerships and create a more, hopefully, financially nurturing, secure system for the public arts to continue? Yeah.
Well, we were saying before that individual changes, right? Like or individual patronage or individual collectors. So we started, like, I mean, we were 5 of us, and it was just individual passion. Because we link and we create those links between like private and public, and it has been progressively easier because, of course, when you then set like a path and like establish like how can I say, like good and safe, which means that, you know, if we've done like a good project in Lodi and it was really, Delhi is of course like also the capital where like a lot of government officials are like, you know, going in and out. So they were seeing Lodi walls and they were started to get like sort of like, you know, curious about it. And it was safe, right? Because it was successful under every kind of standard,
Urban
right?
Arts Commission was very proud of what you all did.
Yeah, so I mean, and then it propagated, like, I mean, the voice spread, right? So it became easier and easier progressively. However, is also like a meeting with other individuals, because of course we had horrible like meetings as well, and like cases like of absolutely closure, or, you know, like, I mean, just like not understand, like, yeah, like closure, I would say. Anyhow, it's possible, but it's very difficult because essentially there is no system. So when there is no system, it's easy to create a system if you find like people that, for whatever reason, kind of like wants to believe in it. Because the very critical point is that there are no really regulation or systemic laws that kind of like, you know, also something as simple as there are so many abandoned spaces, and space is a big matter, right? They're unutilized because of multiple reasons, but mainly it's just because it's extra work for that official, and also it can represent like a possible controversial, like kind of like situation, because you never know what is coming up, right? For the private, on the other side, is that, like, I mean, like, I would say that, like, private investors would like to have a stability and a continuity. So I guess that, like, tackling these is, like, I mean, again, one part is systemic, because whenever arts and culture will be truly recognized as, like, a great sort of, like, you know, a great, like, sort of like thing of the country, also economically speaking, not just like from a point of view of aesthetics or like, but really valuable at multiple levels. This is when perhaps like something can already start changing, right? Because if it's put in like top priorities, then perhaps like, you know, it's also like government officials will also work towards it, right? So there are like different things, systemic changes that may happen, but they're like going to be very slow, yeah. There are some pushes like G20, then everything gets painted, right? Like, I mean, but those pushes are exactly, right? So I mean, but those pushes are like, you know, yeah. So again,
our first edition was held at the Jawahar Kala Kendra.
I was just going to say that I visited that, and that itself was a private public.
And I mean, that's a government institution. So it was, it was supported by the government as well. But there was a person with vision who was the director. So once that changes, then things change, you know, so that's the reality we live with in this country. And I would imagine in other parts of the world as well. But here probably more. Yeah.
Here's hoping for more visionaries. Dadiba, so here's what I wanted to ask you. You know, we were talking a lot in our pre-conversation about how and if art is a soft power. And it has undergone many institutions and individuals giving it that type of patronage. Of course, we're sitting in one such institution like the NGMA. We're talking about an exhibition like Air India and its collection. I wanted to ask you that what are some of the trends and shifts that you've observed in the auctioning market over the years? And have the tastes and preferences of collectors that you've known over the years, have they evolved, and how have they evolved?
Well, I think culture and art as a soft power, I think, is something we completely underutilize. Besides that short period in the 80s when we had the festivals of India, UK, and France, we haven't really exploited that. And I think Air India in that sense has been, besides having embassies in different cities, I think Air India has been a great ambassador for the country in terms of acquiring art, putting up art in foreign offices, making it a part of the environment of their staff as well. And I've known a lot of people who worked with Air India who've started off with no background of art and after a few years talk to you about paintings that they have. So I think art as a soft power can change a lot. And well, it is to some degree the government's role, but I think we as Indians have our priorities a little different. We constantly want to show that how far we progress economically or scientifically, but we forget to show the world what we're capable of in terms of our culture and contemporary culture. I don't necessarily mean ancient culture. From the context of the auction house, you realize how fickle the market is. As a gallery, you were restricted to one area, and that's fine. But as an auction house, we do fine and decorative art. And I think in the 11 years that we've been around, we've seen so many shifts. So we sold Dr. Jamshed Baba's estate in 2011, 10 or 11. And Chinese ceramic was pretty popular then. Over the last few years, there's just no interest in it. So these kind of changes come around. It's like also silver. Earlier, hallmark silver tend to do very well. Now I find good old Indian silver doing very well. So these kind of changes, shifts in taste, I think will constantly keep happening.
Okay. I find that's fickle was a very crucial word there, and the fact that you said that trends change so much, I think that's something for us to keep in mind as more of a hopeful thing for the things that we're even trying to achieve, that hopefully the preferences of culture consumption change to include all that we're kind of raging for very passionately.
No, I think here we Indians have a herd mentality. Just as you said, everyone goes and stands in front of that same image and shoots it because they're just sort of mentally blocked to think for themselves, and they don't have the confidence to believe that they could choose another location which could turn out to be even more successful than the previous. We're just a herd mentality, that's it.
Here's hoping for arts education to change that at all levels, from primary to tertiary. Okay, I have a closing question because we've covered so much ground, a lot of common ground and a lot of uncommon ground. I wanted to understand that outside of what you all have already mentioned, what are our blind spots today? What do we need to pay attention to for a more inclusive arts ecosystem just in the coming decade, like in the next 10 years? What should we be doing better?
I can't really think of anything outside of what we've talked about. That's so fundamental. You can only build on that. I think that's what's very important. And I just do want to say, to continue what Dadiba just said, I wish there were more contemporary models of what Air India did. We've grown up at a time where India is dissed for everything, but for what it's done with art, taking it and Mrs. Parekh sitting there, who's responsible for so much of what's here. And when I was walking around with her a little while ago, I think it was fantastic to say, she's telling me, in our Paris office, there were all those fantastic sculptures there, and people came and they knew what it was. And in this office it was there. I mean, that's the way. That's the soft power and the ambassadorship we should aim for as a country, with companies everywhere. I mean, with branches of companies that go everywhere, with the government at embassies and at places that Indians and other people come to visit.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Just on the point of soft power, I mean, again, recent experience. I mean, so many people internationally are just interested that something like this is happening. And there's not enough happening, that is international. I mean, look at the Jaipur Lit Fest now, that's become such a big thing, and it has people coming from all around the world.
Absolutely,
I
absolutely.
mean, we need to have a lot more happening in India, and because there are people, India draws people, and we don't realize that, you know, it is a draw in itself. People, you know, are willing to come just to participate, to be, to, you know, to learn. And, you know, it's really something that we should exploit going forward, I think. Yeah.
Absolutely. Julia?
Well, I don't have anything to add.
Okay.
Well, I mean, I would like to close on perhaps on a positive note, because that's like has been at least like our story, like over the course of 10 years. We grew from really like zero, like we were like bringing our buckets of like paints, and like, you know, there were like volunteers from Baroda, like artists, like not graduated artists from Baroda helping us out. And like it really started like just because like street artists from all over the world wanted to come to India. It was like a blank canvas like in the cities, because that's also the incredible part. In the rural areas, like everything is painted, right? Like, I mean, walls are canvases and are taking as speakers of like private or public matters and etc., or advertising for that matter, but everything is painted, right? And in the city is like, you know, like dull bare land, and like that was very exciting for many. And then we grew up like a lot because of like visionary people that we met in the government as well, because like, I mean, of course, like we decided like to do our projects in government spaces to avoid what is called gentrification, let's say. So it was also a conscious decision for that matter. And I think that there is a lot of potential, because India, in like again, as I was mentioning, in the absence of laws in regards to arts and culture, opens up like for creativity. And I compare this to Singapore, for instance, where everything is hyper-regulated, or to Germany, where I recently lived for 2 years. And you have that, like Germany, of course, has a great funding system, right? But what ends up like being is also that a lot of times you have funding for that thing and that thing only. And you start thinking, in that box and that box only, because this is where I can paint, this is where I can hang my art, and that, and so on and so forth. So yes, great support, but then greater restrictions. So I guess that what it's possible here, it's really immense, because there is a lot of like wonderful loopholes and a lot of people with great visions and energy. I mean, it's all about like numbers here, right? And the numbers are immense. People are so many, and you have greater energy. So I think that things will like, I mean, things are changing, thanks also to, you know, like the interest that also art and like is having like through online mediums. So I'm quite positive that like it's going to get somewhere in a better stage. Yeah, you also see like now Bombay Art Fair is coming.
Yeah.
There are more things happening. So.
Absolutely, and I think that you know, before we head to the audience, I just also want to be able to say that, you know, we've had a really comprehensive, critical conversation around what is working and what isn't working and what can change. I also want to highlight all the things that we're doing in and of itself become aspects of a lot of love towards public arts. In all the plugs that we've done, I just want to remind everybody that the Ceramics Triennale is upcoming early next year in Delhi. Yeah, to please go to the show in Kotachiwari that is part of Sheila's bar market. For the next auction, that will happen, yes. And whatever next start has planned for us, absolutely. Yes, and my plug as well, guys. I'm curating Chemol's 60th anniversary exhibition, so I'll see you all in September at Chemol Prescott Road, okay? And now, questions from the audience. You've been very patient, and there's already one hand over there. Go for it.
Hi. So my question is, how would each of you define art? Simple question, but not easy, I guess. And what is its use? Like what, why? Why do we need it? What is it? Yeah.
Very easy question.
Very easy. I mean, like, if you had to explain it to a 5-year-old, I guess. But not a 5-year-old, yeah.
Okay. To explain to a 5-year-old, not a 5-year-old, what is art for all of us and why is it necessary? I'm just moderating today.
Well, I'd define art in a very simple way. It's a creative process that enhances your life.
So for me, art, to continue that, is about you. It is almost selfish, and you don't have to think of whether somebody else likes it or not. You're really lucky if they do. Whereas design, just as the opposite, has to give you a solution. Otherwise, it's not design. So art is purely hedonistic, and if it's fantastic and really good, everybody feels moved by it. Why is it necessary? Because it makes life much more valuable than it would be without it. It makes you feel different. It makes you think different. It brightens your day. It can sadden you and make you think. All good art does bits of that all the time.
Wait, what about bad art?
Just so we'll let everybody finish answering your first question first.
Oh.
Bad art,
My bad.
I mean, isn't that
Massively
who defines
subjective.
it? But if I think something's bad art, I throw it away, and so should you. So keep only the art you love.
Anjani, Julia, anything to add?
Well, as a practitioner, it's something that I just need to do. So that's, as far as I'm concerned, that's art. So it's a need. And like Sheila said, if somebody finds what I do beautiful, interesting, whatever it is, that's a bonus. But I do it because I want to do it. And I need to do it.
I mean, I go back like to again like street art or graffiti, like as like a starting point. Like it's like the way of communicating and making yourself being heard, especially when perhaps you are not heard at all, right? So like graffiti writers, for instance, started just because they were like in the suburbs and they were like absolutely marginalized and excluded from the main society. And where they started from trains, because they were going from like, you know, the outskirts of New York to the center. And they were really like sort of like putting their art, their name. And by doing that, they were opening, I believe, possibilities of imagination, of changing what is given, of changing given structures. So my name is given, right? By my mom and my father and perhaps my grandmother, I don't even know. But can I, like, you know, my body also somehow, right? The city as well. I haven't decided much for where I'm living, right? And my surroundings. But I can create images that communicate beyond words, and that I also think is very important about art, is like visuals, so it doesn't matter what language you speak or what education you've had, and it communicates and it can sort of like open possibilities for imagination and action, feeling empowered essentially in the society, yeah.
Good evening, and thank you for that lovely discussion. There were two words that came to my mind when you all were speaking. One is the sensitization. I mean, if you go one step back from art, it's about heritage. I mean, do we really value our heritage? So that to me is the sensitization process. Like, grassroots is also a very large word. Are you talking about people who are going to school? Are you talking about an employer who is large enough to take a lunch break and take all his employees, say, to a Macmillan? Or are you talking about this huge group of volunteers who has a ceramic institute program, say at, again, a ceramic institute at Waterloo? There's so many things. That is one. And in terms of process, I mean, one thing that, say, Instagram and things like that have done to us is, say, somebody who is not really accessing art, you can actually see the process. And I think that is a very important thing, not just the selfies that are taken at Sassoon Dock, or maybe, you know, the waiting to be on a mailing list where you'll hear something and rush as soon as you can and maybe go again and see it again or something like that. And again, when you walk into, say, Shrila's exhibition, you know it's not just design, it's not just craft, it's not just preserving, say, a group of artisans, but it's art. I mean, nobody needs education to know that. I mean, it's a connect that is instant. So I think these are things that, you know, maybe we are privileged in these Tier 1 cities to experience, but I really wish, you know, there was a better way of evangelizing and getting out there.
And there was a lovely overarching comment with a lot of questions that you answered yourself, so I totally love that. More hands. Can we have that gentleman, please?
Hello. Good evening. My question is how will AI generated art affect beyond the canvas?
Good. Okay. Not okay. Anybody? The question is basically AI generated art. How does it impact?
Your generation should be telling us.
I mean, but NFT is a great market we have right now, NFTs, and you guys are more experienced when it comes to art and the financial market. So I would not be the right person to.
Can I try?
My opinion, which is my opinion only and doesn't conform to anything anybody around me thinks or believes, okay? For me, art is something that truly makes a difference to my life. If a painting moves in my house, it's a different feeling. I see it at a different time. It makes a difference. Just from that simple thing, I totally reject the connection with something that's on a computer, on a screen or whatever. It can be valuable, it can make differences to the world, but it will not make a difference to my heart, the way I feel, or that moment. So I'm not a believer in that at all, and I'm sure there's a whole world that there is, but I just wanted to give you that.
I can try. This is basically something that I deal with in my classroom. So I teach big history and design futures. So we try and study future trends and how that's going to impact, well, everything. So for example, the fastest chess player in the world is a bot. It's no longer a human being. You may already know that. There was already an AI-generated artwork that was part of an auction just to see if did it generate the same kind of value. I think that the answer to this is something to do with multiple historical trends when a burst of technology happened, which is when we went from making manuscripts by hand to making it through like a printing press. Those shifts did actually change, but what we would observe in art, according to me, would be that even with the influx of AI, you have to understand that the way Indian stratification works in this country, there is an absolute lack of internet penetration in many parts of India. It would be very impossible for all of the handmade art happening in the rest of the regions of the country to be impacted by AI. So significantly for it to actually change how we consume and understand art in this country, it will not happen to the degree that you're seeing in the West. That's my understanding as a teacher. So, can we have you right there, please?
I was truly fascinated by what you said about the decolonization process. And I'd love to know what exactly is the progress that your work has made in bringing back artifacts. Because I think there are also families in our city, in Bombay, in Delhi, that smuggle out heritage statues from temples. I mean, that's a parallel business going on of smuggling out heritage. So yeah, I'd love to know whether that's getting any regulation now with the government, given how nationalistic now the mood and the sentiment, and your work with the decolonization, and the awareness that needs to come with that.
It's a very easy question. My work deals with cultural repatriation. I primarily have studied the artifacts that were looted during the mutiny in 1857 and that are part of multiple spaces in England, from museums to auction houses. That is the area that I've studied. 10 years ago, when I was talking about it at conferences, it was a room full of white men in England, and nobody really cared about what I was saying. Cut to 10 years now. My research is sought after. If not me, my research definitely is very sought after, because Vice World News wanted to produce from Empires of Dirt, a hugely popular mass project, how they could create an actual tour in one of the leading museums in the world using their Wi-Fi. How could they create a tour where the public that enters it for free could actually understand how each artifact there, we selected 10 countries, barring, like for example, India, China, but of course like Rapa Nui Islands, we went to, I worked with historians from New Zealand, Greece, Egypt, you name it, 10 artifacts. What it did, the people that used the tour the most were British citizens, which was very impactful because we can keep harping about it in our own countries that, okay, you know, there's this there, there's that there. But it is the present generation in other countries that needs to understand this aspect of decolonization, because the lobbying popular pressure that can be put on governments in other countries to return, repatriate, or do reparations, which Germany has actually done for Africa quite a bit recently. That's the push. So it was a very mass project. None of my academic papers, none of my conferences ever had that impact that this mass project, which was on Instagram, just made that kind of difference. So I think there's definitely that. What's like the Empire podcast? Yeah, absolutely. So, and decolonization is a buzzword right now. We need to get on that train, simply because if we can achieve something from it, why not? But otherwise, it's a very popular term, which is being used in all former colonial powers, cultural lobbies, to be able to look good, feel bad, and look good. Feel better. Oh, sorry. Feel better about what they've done in the past, as much as looks good as a nice public international exercise. And I think we need to milk that.
Thank you guys for a very insightful conversation. It really took us beyond the canvas in many ways. But you use the 10-year window, and I'm also talking about 10 years. You can see there's so many changes and so many positive things happening in the arts. I mean, you see this room full on a weekday. I mean, we've had 300 people wanting to come for this talk. Technology is not going anywhere. I disagree with you with the AI part. I think it's not going anywhere. It's here to stay. When photography came out, the purists hated it. See where it is. You have to use the same analogy and be open about it. But thank you for the wonderful insights. Thank you, Charlene, for moderating it so well. Perhaps next time we'll put you on the panel instead of moderating. Thank you to our hosts, the NGMA, to Nazneen Banu, the director, and to Shruti, the deputy director, for always having us here and letting us curate these programs, and to the audience for being here always. Do find out more, stalk us on our social media, or you'll find more information on our website. Thank you once again for coming, and have a wonderful evening. Good night.